In the late 18th century, a French occultist, going by the pseudonym Etienne, would convince himself that the traditional tarot key, or tarot playing cards, originating from northern Italy, were derived from ancient Egyptian texts supposedly written by Thoth, the god of knowledge. By using cartomancy, a technique believed to harness insight through divination, he would derive 22 greater secrets represented by certain cards, which he would separate into the major arcana. In the New Age of thought, such ideas would flourish, as the individual self was seen as the ultimate source of the spirit world. Darkon's Elegy of Madness is a major storyline released during the Shadows of War main saga of the MMORPG AdventureQuest worlds. As part of the weekly release structure of the game, it was slowly developed over the course of 3 years, exceeding the length and update frequency of similar side stories, and even matching the ambition of the main story sagas. Running parallel to the other releases, it was spearheaded by the Artix Entertainment staff member Darkon. It would serve as his new in-game character's introduction to the world of lore, exploring the long untouched northeastern part of the map, housing the isolated kingdom of Ostravia, telling the story of a man discovering the developing prejudice and corruption spawning from within, and swearing vengeance for their wrongdoings by any means necessary. It is a story about love, betrayal, political tension, dark ritualistic secrets, and the influence of entities beyond our understanding. Being a returning player after years of inactivity, and having documented the early years of the game to an almost tedious degree, I was recommended this saga as a shining beacon of the best AQ Worlds has to offer in terms of an enthralling narrative. But what does this story do to differentiate itself from the grand narrative of the 13 Lords of Chaos, the Necromancers of Doomwood, or the Tragedy of Sepulture? How did this saga captivate the entire player base and reinvigorate the future stories of the game? This video will serve as a story analysis of Darkon's saga, recounting the events, discussing the themes and symbolism, and comparing and contrasting the narrative in terms of the greater Artix Entertainment universe. This is the story of Darkon's Elegy of Madness. This video will contain spoilers for AdventureQuest Worlds, and light spoilers for Berserk, Chainsaw Man, and Neon Genesis Evangelion. Before we begin this story, some context is required. Firstly, just who is this Darkon character? The keen-eyed fan will notice a striking similarity to another character named Darkon that appeared in the story of Dage vs. the Seraphs. This is the avatar of the artist Darkon, a longtime fan of the games produced by Artix Entertainment. He would be very active in the community, entering fan art competitions for the game, and soon he would make friends with staff artists like Laken, Kotaro, and Dage. He had great ambitions to join the team, but sadly had to wait a few years until he was old enough to join. Immediately getting to work, he helped with character designs on a new story directed by Laken, as they were already acquainted. As is customary for staff members, they get the choice to have their own avatar in the game's story. But he personally had no hand in the writing process, so his avatar was little more than a footnote in this story. Later, he would leave the AQ Worlds team to help on the up-and-coming AdventureQuest 3D project. There, he would blossom as an artist and create a unique aesthetic loved by the community. As he was shifted around as needed, he would start introducing this art style to AQ Worlds as well, and in January of 2020, he would get a late birthday celebration in which his new and improved avatar would debut. This was a small release, mainly meant to be a hub for farming the newly released equipment made by him, but the design notes would assure the players that the map would expand in the future, and Darkon would slowly start teasing what that would entail. Through his social media, more concept art would pop up, and it seemed like he would get a small storyline, just like Laken once did. But because of the player feedback, this would evolve into so much more. A fully blown 10-part saga directed by Darkon with his own unique story. But as he admits himself, he's not a writer. Instead, he would be the main artist, while planning the details of the story in collaboration with staff writer Siles, so they could execute his vision in a compelling narrative. The fruit of his labor would bear result 4 months later, as the original birthday map would get updated to be the first act of the saga. The inciting incident of this saga is very by the books and unassuming. Our hero gets a letter concerning the disappearance of a warrior written by the grieving family. He was last seen heading towards the basement of Yulgar's Inn, but as he went further in, darkness enveloped him. Investigating, we somehow get transported to a wasteland of trash and treasure alike, illuminated by a red glowing planetoid. This is what used to be Darkon's garden, now tended by a mysterious character named Far, who implores us not to get lost or touch the copper-like red liquid, as so many others have before. Using the iconic location of Yulgar's Inn as the starting point is a nice subversion, as many other storylines start by introducing a new part of the world. This immediately plants the idea that something is off about this place, as the average player has spent dozens of hours at this location without ever encountering this portal. The general artistic direction of the map is also unique. We've had dark and morbid stories before, but there is something truly eerie about this place. Humans and animals in test tubes, diary notes documenting people losing their minds as they get lost, and the unassuming cutesy creatures all numbered like experiments, turning monstrous as you look away. These elements build the intrigue and mystery of this place. Far isn't much help, as she talks in a very cold and distant manner, almost like something trying to imitate human speech. Venturing to the top and encountering the largest creature of all, clearly exhibiting human anatomy amidst the fleshy tendrils and toothy exterior, we get a taste of the horrific designs to come. This was a clear departure from the usual creatures of AQ Worlds, using horror to effectively communicate the more serious tone of the story, as opposed to the mix of comedy and action the game was usually known for. Finally meeting the owner of the garden, Darkon, he assures us in a very esoteric manner that the missing person we are looking for can't be found here, and so we wander off, still in search. Darkon sits around, surrounded by weapons he nicknames Debris, followed by numbers. This isn't exclusive to his equipment though, as he also offers food using the same nomenclature. There is clearly a theme of systematic numbering with the creatures and debris, which further build upon the mystery of what he is doing at the garden. Darkon's throne is surrounded by spider lilies, which are often associated with abandonment, loss, and death, which hint towards his origins and future. Wandering the wasteland, we arrive at the village of Eridani, most likely named after Epsilon Eridani, a star in the real world with similar properties to our sun, found in the Eridanus constellation, visible to the naked eye. Greeted by Re, a proclaimed gal pal of Far, she warns us that the warrior we are looking for is long dead. Re's description reads as Ox and Horse Wrangler, a reference to Chinese mythology and the guardians of the underworld, hinting towards the horrors we are about to face inside the village. The hero isn't feeling well, and the glow of the red moon is more intense than ever. Re explains that time has been stuck on the same night for years in this town, and that the villagers are getting restless. Murder sprees, paranoia, children going missing, and creatures reminiscent of the ones found in the garden run rampant. Our presence as an outsider appearing for the first time in a decade is enough to make the villagers tip over the edge to hysteria, and cast their mortal shell, becoming human-like amalgam creatures, just like the one in the garden. We are forced to defend ourselves, even though it seems that shreds of their humanity still remain. This is a much more morally grey encounter than what other storylines usually provide. The hero is no stranger to killing, but normally there is a direct evil intent. But this was more comparable to a mercy killing, hearing the villagers talk about their bodies stretching and skulls gnawing from the inside. In the end, it was all just an experiment by Rei and another member of Darkon's team called So. They make a note of us being a greater entity, which ties in with the continuity of the main saga, with us being the reincarnation of the eternal dragon who once governed all of time. It's nice to see this fact being recognized outside of the main saga, as it should be a well-known fact at this point in the story, and should be a major point of contention for any opposition. In any case, it seems that we are slowly being tangled up in something beyond our scope of understanding, and now that we have confirmed the death of the missing person to be an orchestrated hoax to lure us into this location, we might as well search for answers. Looking at the broken statue at the center of the city, we find an insignia matching that of the royal capital of the Kingdom of Astravia. Located outside the rule of any allied faction, Astravia has been isolated for centuries, and as the only survivor of the Eridani massacre, we gain an audience with King Drago. But as we soon learn, nothing is as it seems in this region. Drago is an archetypal egomaniacal king, truly unredeemable scum. His gallant appearance, clad in pure white, hides his true merciless character, complemented by the blood-red soaked inner cape lining and facial features. He revels in manipulating us to stop the rebellion against his kingdom, because of his ignorance regarding the spreading creature disease and exploiting the citizens as soldiers to expand his kingdom. There are clearly some deep-rooted issues of insecurity, as we see him agitated by the fact that the citizens praise us for defending them from the invading creatures, instead of praising him for manipulating us to help. He doesn't believe in valor, bravery, or honor. The only thing that matters to him is the governmental power bestowed upon him, which he clearly abuses on our hero, referring to us as kitten and wanting to use us as a chair. He tempts us to strike at him, as it will only result in his subjects suffering, as all damage he receives is magically redirected upon the Astravians, which might be a reference to a certain manga about a chainsaw man, but not a conscious one from Darkon's side at least. Working for Drago seems like the lesser of two evils, considering the horror we experienced at Eridani. But as it turns out, we know nothing of the bottomless malice within the human heart. As the invasion grows beyond control, Drago is persuaded to use the coronation of the Celestials, a ritual which sacrifices people with Astravian blood in order to summon eldritch avatars of the Astravian god who champions the royal lineage, Alpreca. The creature summoned is referred to as the Moon, which we learn upon future use is derived from the major arcana of tarot cards. Each avatar is more powerful than the last, and the final entity is said to be able to rule the world. In order for Drago to one-up our contributions, he would willingly sacrifice his own subjects. He is not looking for respect or admiration, but pure compliance and recognition of authority earned through fear. He truly believes he is just by the account of him being supported by a literal god. This isn't exclusive to the world of literature, as the medieval age's kingdoms were often backed by the church, claiming the royal family to be chosen by God to rule, as they enacted the injustices of a monarchy. The hero increasingly gets thrown into an escalating situation of moral objection, as neither side of this war is very appealing. But it is our duty to help the innocent civilians, so our new objective is to stop the king from further using his sacrificial powers. Luckily, we do find help in the traitor La, as she helps us defeat the commander of the creature invasion T. This naming convention of phonetic musical sound is derived from the concept of the major scale, as its ascending key structure is often sung as Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. We contextually learn from La and Drago's conversation that she was once an acquaintance of Darkon named Aurora, but was killed by the hands of Drago himself, along with Darkon. This indicates a rebirth of identity, as the dead characters now assume their new scale titles, along with Darkon being referred to as the conductor. La has defected from Darkon, as his lust for revenge has sent him down an unrighteous path. If we wish to stop Darkon, we must protect the king, like a game of chess, represented in the quest names we receive, all using chess theory linguistics: Suk Swang, Dead Position, Isolani. Darkon's intentions place him and Drago as mirrors of each other. They are both acquainted with groups named after categories defined as major. They use manipulation to get our hero to do their dirty work, and they have little care for the citizens as they exploit them to further their goals. The difference lies in their intent, as Draco seems to be born from nature as a total asshole, while Darkon was nurtured into this role, being on the receiving end of a grave wrongdoing, resulting in his execution. As Draco uses his power to transfer any damage done upon him to his subject, Darkon gathers misfits and victims to share their pain with him. This comes to a head when Darkon and Draco reunite, revealing them as brothers. After many years of planning, Darkon prepares his checkmate, as the final judgment draws near. We learn that the ritual restarts with each new ruler, and has never been completed, as the penultimate sacrifice would be one's own life. A fact which Darkon exploits. He forces Draco to start the ritual, sacrificing both him and the citizens. In a final act of defiance, Draco commands us to evacuate as many citizens as possible, be that him finally showing compassion or just to spite Darkon, as he tells him they grew up to be just alike. With judgment being summoned, each Astravian's heart will be weighed, listed on the massive scroll spilling from the primordial body being summoned, showing the names of multiple characters we've interacted with. Reality itself starts to crumble as the streets of Astravia get riddled with realistic eyes and creatures like Hand. These designs are so far removed from the established art style that they become uncanny and truly not of this world. The arrows indicating the next screen map changing color is also a nice touch. We find the remaining Scale member Mi lulling the citizens to sleep as their life will soon be forfeit. She clues us in on the sins of the people, as she was once betrayed and hunted for being an exotic Calistige moth girl. The people of Astravia have been isolated for so long that they have no tolerance for outsiders, and we know that firsthand with our experience at Eridani. This highlights one of the moral dilemmas of this saga, if people should be judged by the sins of the father principle. Is one to be blamed by the actions of their heritage, or is it never too late to seek forgiveness and change? The events Mi experienced happened decades ago, enough time for a new generation to be born, who are getting judged for something they had no hand in. Mi's hypocrisy is highlighted through her actions, as Darkon himself says, that the one who stabs another is just as guilty as the one who idly watches by without stopping it. As Mi lulls the people to sleep, she is merely assuring their death without having to be the one to do the task. Mi isn't to blame though, as she is too pure and naive for this cruel world, being cursed by Darkon's aligning ambitions for a better society. She lets us pass as our conviction shows our good intention. But before we can face Darkon, our own sins must be judged, as the massacre at Eridani comes to haunt us. The fact that our actions don't get brushed to the side and that the hero has to deal with the trauma of that experience is really well executed, as we should be better, being a greater entity striving for balance. Catching up with La and Darkon at the top of the list, La's conflicting feelings of loyalty get the better of her. She knows what Darkon's ultimate goal is, and is convinced that the summoning of judgment means that Darkon has already won. Having betrayed her people, her friends, and now us, as she wasn't able to stop the summoning, she forfeits her life to Darkon, as we are sent careening down to the ground. La is a tragic character, bound by loyalty to a man she had to watch fall from grace and devolve into the same monster as the one who originally betrayed them. With judgment having passed, only the final tarot card remains, the world. As we fall, the last members of the scale, the Door Twins, appear. They represent the beginning and end because of their placement on the scale, but also because they will make us understand the past actions of Astravia before we conclude the story in the final showdown for the fate of the world. In the past of Eridani, we find the untouched statue of Crown Prince Darkon. Back then, he was a humble man who sought to reconcile the growing bandit problem causing strife among the villages. It was a tumultuous time, as the king laid in his deathbed, and the opinion of the common folk would go critical as Darkon in disguise would have a fateful encounter with a certain wandering mercenary. Enter Suki, a woman clearly exhibiting the design traits of the Seraphic Paladins who we saw in Laken's Saga all those years ago. We do get an acknowledgement of the previous seraphic Darkon, but it turns out that they just happen to look alike and share the same name. A piece of dramatic irony that will come to haunt the future of this flashback. As Suki found a home in the royal army, she would spark a change in Darkon's heart because of her vast knowledge of the outside world. He would come to understand and love Suki, even though she deserted her duties as a paladin. But that grace wouldn't extend to Drago, as he only saw Suki as common brutish filth. Suki's technological knowledge would improve the lives of the peasants, and in turn elevate them closer to that of the royals. With Darkon undoubtedly being King Draconis' successor as the firstborn, Suki accidentally giving him a scar during a sparring match, and their mother dying during his childbirth, Drago always had a chip on his shoulder. Now that Darkon saw it fit to change the establishment, he would do anything in his power to sow the seeds of doubt between the lovers. Even though it is Darkon's duty to marry a noble, he refuses to give up on Suki. But as Drago's whispers haunt her, Suki clearly begins to develop imposter syndrome, manifested in her nightmares. Because of Drago, she thinks that she is exploiting Darkon so that she might become a pampered princess. The fact that Darkon, a man reminding her of her broken vows as a seraphic paladin, is willing to risk his status and duty to be with her, makes her feel unworthy. Ironically, Drago might have gotten his wish to keep the established order and become king himself if he didn't practice his prejudice. Darkon was considering giving up the crown, as he only held a passion for music and Suki, but as she was beginning to waver, it gave Darkon the motivation to become king and make a change, with his ultimate goal of abolishing the monarchy. As Darkon prepares to ascend the throne, he has to undergo a challenge by reaching the top of the observatory, where he will receive the blessing of Alpreca. Reading the diary left by his father, which serves as our quest window, each chapter is labeled by a star constellation: Scorpio, Leo, Pisces, but also specific star systems, ending on Alpha Piscium, colloquially known as Alresha, being the likely etymological origin of Alpreca. The naming convention of the Astravian kingdom keeps pointing towards the stars, and the sudden shift in art style confirms this. It is a great payoff to the fans of the extended Artix Entertainment universe, as it is clearly giving MechQuest vibes, which is extended through the computer log found that calls back to the war between the Shadow Scythe Empire and the Draconoids. This reveals the twist of Alpreca being the Empress Arcana, being connected through a gateway in a crashed vessel from the MechQuest universe. The Arcana was once whole, but now lies scattered, and only through the coronation of the Celestials can they be made whole again. The first king made a deal when he found the ship, his sacrifice for their boons. The fact that the whole civilization of the kingdom and their religious institution is a result of a single mech escaping the rapture of MechQuest is fascinating, especially being the blood-soaked secret of their prosperous society, entirely burdened on the king's conscience. The grotesque enormity of the Primordial's actual bodies instead of the stitched corpse vessels of the ritual is a sight to behold, but as the unescapable truth fills Darkon's mind, Drago betrays him. Holding Suki hostage, their worst nightmares become reality. Draco manipulated the population to riot against the royal guards, kidnapping Suki and killing Titania, Regalos, and Aurora. This tragedy is great. It is not quite on the same level as Griffith's Eclipse from Berserk, but it really paints a bleak picture of the characters being surrounded by eldritch truth while losing everything they hold dear. It gives Darkon a good motivation, but doesn't make you sympathize with the monster he becomes. Giving Darkon a matching scar, he, along with Suki, are executed, floating along in an endless dream, as the last grasp of their life clings to their final moments, embracing each other. But fate has other plans. With Drago starting a new cycle of the coronation of the Celestials, naturally the Fool is summoned into the world, using the sacrificed body as a vessel. Appearing before Darkon in a dreamlike state, they make a proposition for him. As the representation of endless opportunity and beginnings, they never get to witness a journey's end. Even Primordials have longings, and they see a possible conclusion they would very much like to witness. Instead of using Darkon's body, He will allow him to return, at the cost of the fool tagging along in his subconscious. Darkon accepts, and his body becomes the first debris, while Suki becomes the second as his weapon. The Empress's beloved against the fool's beloved, in a race to summon the world and reshape reality to their ideal state. One, a king of an entire nation, the other, a king of nothing but discarded debris, like him and his loved ones. The more accustomed Darkon gets to his new body as part primordial, the more Law will start to reject his presence. So he recovers the remains of his loyal allies, using the debris to heal them. Assembling his scale, we hear the harrowing stories of each member's death or torture. The scale each represent different minority groups, and use these characteristics to highlight the social injustices committed in our own world. T is a timid man with feminine characteristics, not fitting into the gender roles expected of him. So he hides his appearance in a huge ironclad armor. He also in death gains a speech impediment, slowing his talk. La is the reverse, sporting a masculine appearance with short hair for battle efficiency, clear muscle definition and countless scars. Being of common descent, she doesn't get the respect she deserves from nobles like Drago. Re had a complete mental reset due to the brain damage she suffered from her death, and she could also be interpreted as being lesbian, considering her close affectionate bond to Fa. Fa, Mi and So respectively are not human, being outsiders with special conditions. Fa is an alien creature, exhibiting traits of autism or neurodivergence, not understanding social cues, as they had to carve themselves into a human form to feel like they would fit in with the rest of the scale. They almost lost all resemblance of their original form, except for one horn, urged to be kept by Re. We've already discussed the crossbreed Mi, but they distinctively identify as non-binary and non-human, which they were seen as less than human for and hunted because of their pretty wings. So is a shapeshifter with dissociative identity disorder, likely due to the trauma they faced, as they never had their own identity and had to blend in, constantly being called a monster child when discovered. They are also the adoptive child of Darkon and Suki before their untimely demise, leaving them orphaned once again. One final revelation. As Darkon's garden fluctuates in space and time, he tries to send a clone to the past and stop Suki from ever entering Astravia, perhaps saving her in another timeline. But fate is cruel, and the mechanisms of the universe will always correct itself. The story has gone full circle on a meta-narrative level, carrying the seraphic Darkon along with his forbidden knowledge of future technology into the hands of Lakin and his saga, ultimately resulting in Suki traveling to Astravia in the first place. Having experienced Darkon's sorrow firsthand, we still choose the free will of every living creature over petty revenge. But as the world starts to erase law, a final confrontation is had with the scale, especially So bearing the title of the last Astravian princess. But Darkon won't let us hurt them. He gives a sorrowful acknowledgement that his perfect world will result in the death of everyone restored by his debris, including himself, as the power of the Arcana keeping him alive would cease. Darkon won't let his final moments be of his friend's desperate struggle to stop us, so he will finish this himself. The creator of the old world versus the creator of the new world. One final clash. Sacrificing all of lore in a similar way to the third impact of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Again, apparently not intentional. The world awaits the commanding wish of the victor. As the Arcana is now whole, they promptly bid lore farewell, leaving us with 6 measly words. Thank you, and my deepest apologies. To Darkon, their higher existence leaves them apt of emotion. The concern they showed for the horrified newly coronated kings and the powers they gave them was only because they needed us, but they were by no means in a hurry. The contract has been fulfilled, and the squabbles on law will just be a footnote in the grand scheme of their existence. Perhaps we really just are a piece of debris flying in the sky, as Darkon and the hero are no better, one risking their life to create a better world, and one already having done so without repercussion. Debris is an apt word, scattered rubbish. To higher beings, the lives of mortals are as frivolous as that. Two gods fighting for the fate of the world, yet few will know any of it happened. But that wasn't the point of this battle. To the hero, it was a clash of ideals, justified by might, but won on principle. The hero inadvertently was the one to cause this entire situation, from dying as the Eternal Dragon, triggering the collapse of the Arcanos realm, to releasing Darkon from his timeless garden. The Empress was ready to offer Darkon a way out of the contract before Draco interfered. She truly cared for the Astravian as their new kin, having consumed her debris, becoming part primordial. Along with the Fool finally getting to see the end of a story, it proves that even higher beings can change, and so could humans. With the hero having accepted their incarnation's past sins, striving to repay the world for their selfish actions, Darkon is able to understand that anyone can err, and no matter how grievous the transgression, perhaps one could right their wrongs, just as Suki said so many years ago. He was consumed by hate, and had sacrificed too much to let it all go, even though he knew deep down that this wasn't what Suki wanted. In his final moments, along with the restored remnants of his old comrades, they can leave this world in peace, knowing that their fight wasn't for naught. A scene showing Suki and Darkon appears, embracing each other in the afterlife, with a really impressive unique render for each character, completely breaking the usual format of the cutscenes and heightening this poignant moment. As dusk sets on the fools of the past, dawn rises on the hearts touched by their grace. Good night, Darkon, and good morning, Dad. So, why is the Darkon saga so beloved? It's because it tells a captivating character-driven story, with great personal stakes and a touching conclusion. It uses a mix of established lore, along with a unique visual style to convey a confident story, playing to its strengths in the format of AQ worlds, while subverting the genre with mystery, horror and tragedy. Xylease and Darkon should really be proud of what they created together, along with all the other talented people at Artix Entertainment. I don't think I would be able to analyze any other storylines to this degree, as very few other sagas consider symbolism, themes and world building as much as this one does. Perhaps looking into why some sagas don't work is warranted as a comparison, but for now, this closes the book on another deep dive into AQ worlds. Thanks for watching and have a great day.